What happens when an undercover martial arts master discovers his dojo has lost its way? Ethan Carter built his academy to inspire discipline, respect, and personal growth. But what he finds when he goes undercover is a toxic culture, where students are mocked, instructors abuse their power, and leadership has completely failed. As he steps into the role of a beginner, he sees firsthand how his vision has been twisted. But will he be able to take back control and restore honor to the dojo before it's too late? Stay tuned to see how one leader's return changes everything. Ethan Hayes stood outside the Apex Combat Academy branch, adjusting the straps of his worn-out gym bag. It felt strange to approach one of his own training centers without anyone recognizing him, but that was precisely the point. Over the years, he had built Apex Combat Academy into a respected martial arts chain, expanding to 11 locations across 3 states. The academy had started as a place where students of all skill levels could train in a supportive and disciplined environment, fostering both mental and physical strength. But recently, complaints had started trickling in. Not about the quality of training, but about the culture inside the dojo itself. Students reported that instructors were dismissive, overly harsh, and at times even humiliating toward them. Some said they felt intimidated rather than encouraged, while others simply stopped showing up, their motivation crushed. Ethan had initially brushed off the complaints, trusting his district manager, who reassured him that students were simply too soft and couldn't handle real training. But the more Ethan looked into it, the more he saw a troubling pattern. High dropout rates, low student engagement, and a decline in new enrollments. His gut told him something was wrong, and he couldn't rely on secondhand reports to find out the truth. Determined to see things firsthand, Ethan devised a plan. He disguised himself as Eli Carter, a beginner student eager to learn. With a fake beard, slightly altered posture, and simple workout clothes, he was just another new face walking into the dojo. If the instructors treated new students unfairly, he would experience it himself. If the staff was unhelpful, he would see it with his own eyes. And if his worst fears were true, that the culture of Apex Combat Academy had rotted from the inside, he would have no choice but to tear it down and rebuild it from the ground up. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped inside the dojo. It was time to find out the truth. Ethan, now Eli Carter, pushed open the doors to Apex Combat Academy and took in the scene. The walls were lined with championship banners, and the faint scent of sweat and disinfectant lingered in the air. The dojo had everything it needed to be a thriving martial arts school: padded training mats, heavy bags, a spacious sparring area, and students of all ages practicing various drills. But the energy of the place felt off. Instead of an atmosphere of discipline and encouragement, there was a noticeable tension in the air. At the front desk, a young receptionist barely acknowledged him, too focused on her phone. When he finally got her attention and asked about signing up for beginner classes, she sighed as if it was an inconvenience. "You want to train? Fill this out. Classes are Monday and Wednesday. Fees are up front. No refunds." The lack of enthusiasm was the first red flag. Ethan took the form and moved toward the main training area, where a group of students was stretching. At the center of the room, an instructor, a tall, muscular man with a shaved head and a black belt, barked orders at a group of white belts practicing basic stances. His voice carried through the room, but there was no patience in his tone, only irritation. "Wider stance, more power, you look like you're about to fall over," he snapped at one student. When another hesitated, struggling with the proper technique, he sighed dramatically. "If you can't even get a basic stance right, you might as well quit now." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had always believed that martial arts should be about growth and discipline, not humiliation. This instructor, whose name tag read Marcus, didn't seem interested in helping students improve, only in asserting his dominance. From the corner of his eye, Ethan noticed another instructor, a young woman named Riley, quietly assisting a nervous student with their foot positioning. Unlike Marcus, she actually took the time to explain the movement instead of just barking commands. She spoke with encouragement, not condescension. It was clear she cared, but she was overshadowed by the louder, more aggressive personalities in the room. Ethan had been in dozens of dojos over the years, and he knew that the tone of a gym was set by its leadership. If Marcus and others like him were allowed to dictate the environment, It was no wonder students were losing motivation. Ethan had come here expecting problems, but now he was starting to see just how deep they ran. As Ethan, still disguised as Eli Carter, continued his training at Apex Combat Academy, he quickly realized that the problem ran deeper than just a few harsh words. The environment was built on ego and intimidation, not learning and growth. Instead of instructors guiding students toward improvement, they belittled mistakes, pushed students to exhaustion without proper instruction, and reserved respect only for those who could already fight well. During his first official class, Ethan was partnered with a teenager who was clearly new to martial arts. The boy fumbled with his stance, struggling to find his balance. Before Ethan could offer any quiet encouragement, Marcus stormed over and clapped his hands loudly. "What is this, a dance class? You're supposed to be a fighter, not some wobbly baby deer," he sneered. The boy's face turned red, and his confidence visibly shattered. Marcus didn't offer a correction, just more mockery. Throughout the session, Ethan observed the same toxic behavior again and again. Students who showed natural talent were praised, while those who struggled were treated as wastes of time. One man, a slightly overweight beginner, was paired with an advanced student and was immediately thrown into full-contact sparring without proper preparation. The advanced fighter didn't hold back, landing a hard kick that sent the beginner stumbling back. Instead of checking on him, Marcus laughed. "If you're going to train here, you'd better toughen up. Or don't come back." Ethan clenched his fists. This wasn't how martial arts was supposed to be taught. He had always believed that training was about discipline, respect, and personal growth, not about feeding an instructor's superiority complex. The worst moment came when a young woman hesitantly approached Marcus, asking for clarification on a combination drill. Instead of explaining, he rolled his eyes. "You want a step-by-step tutorial? Maybe you should go take a cardio kickboxing class instead." The snickers from nearby students made it clear that Marcus had made humiliation part of the culture. The only person who seemed to care was Riley. Ethan noticed how she would subtly pull struggling students aside, whisper encouragement, and quietly demonstrate techniques that Marcus couldn't be bothered to explain. But she was clearly fighting an uphill battle, one woman against an entire gym that had been allowed to foster toxicity. Ethan had entered Apex Combat Academy to observe. Now, he knew without a doubt that this gym wasn't broken by accident. It had been rotting from the inside, and if he didn't step in soon, it would only get worse. Ethan had already seen how Marcus poisoned the culture on the mats, but it wasn't just the training that was failing. The entire gym was suffering from neglect, starting at the front desk. After a grueling training session, Ethan approached the reception area, hoping to ask about class schedules and membership options. The young woman at the desk barely glanced up from her phone, lazily scrolling through her screen. He stood there for nearly a full minute before finally clearing his throat. She sighed, tapping at her screen like he was an inconvenience. "Yeah?" Ethan kept his voice neutral. "I was hoping to get some details on memberships." Another sigh. She pointed at a laminated price sheet without looking up. "It's all there." That was it. No enthusiasm, no effort. Not even a basic question like, "What are your goals?" or "What brought you in today?" The kind of simple engagement that any good gym should offer to new clients. Ethan decided to push a little. "Do you offer beginner classes, or is everything mixed?" "I don't know, you'd have to ask a coach." She didn't even try to find the answer. Ethan turned his attention to the rest of the gym. Weights were left scattered across the floor, heavy bags sat torn and deflated, and no one was enforcing any kind of gym etiquette. He saw two members struggling with a machine, trying to figure out how it worked with no guidance in sight. It was clear that no one cared. That was when Ethan asked the question he had been waiting to ask. "Is the gym manager around?" The front desk attendant smirked. "Technically, yeah, but he's usually not here." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had suspected weak leadership, but this confirmed it. A manager who barely showed up meant there was no oversight, no accountability, and no standards being enforced. It explained why Marcus had been allowed to run the classes unchecked, why the front desk had become a customer service disaster, and why even the facility itself looked neglected. Just as he was about to walk away, a frustrated member approached the desk. "Hey, I've been charged twice this month. Can someone fix that?" The receptionist barely looked up. You'll have to email billing." The member groaned, turning away in frustration. Ethan had seen enough. This wasn't just a toxic training environment. It was a sinking ship with no one at the helm. And if the manager wasn't going to fix it, he would. Ethan had seen enough red flags, but the final straw came during an evening class when a young student reached his breaking point. The class had been brutal, not because it was challenging, but because Marcus made it that way on purpose. Instead of guiding students through techniques, he spent most of the session berating and humiliating them. Every mistake was met with sarcasm, every misstep punished with extra drills, and instead of encouragement, students were told how pathetic they were for not keeping up. Ethan watched as a teenage boy named Jason, a quiet but determined student, struggled with a complex kick combination. He wasn't uncoordinated, just new. But Marcus didn't see it that way. "Seriously? That's the best you can do?" Marcus sneered loud enough for the entire class to hear. "I've seen kids half your size throw better kicks than that. Maybe martial arts just isn't your thing." The dojo fell silent. Jason's face turned red, his fists clenching at his sides. He tried again, but now his movements were tense, forced. Marcus scoffed. "Unbelievable. You're embarrassing yourself, kid." The words landed like a gut punch. Jason stopped mid-movement, staring at the mat. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, with slow, deliberate motions, he pulled off his gloves, dropped them on the floor, and stepped back. Marcus frowned. "What are you doing?" Jason's voice was quiet but firm. "I quit." Murmurs spread across the class. Some of the students looked shocked, others uncomfortable, but no one dared to speak up. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. You're really quitting over that? If you can't take criticism, how do you expect to get anywhere in life?" But Jason was done. He turned away, grabbed his bag, and headed for the door. Ethan saw something in the kid's eyes before he left. Disappointment, frustration, but mostly defeat. He wasn't just quitting the class. He was walking away from something that once meant something to him. And Marcus? He just shrugged. One less weakling. That was it. Ethan had held his tongue, observing long enough. But watching a young student be broken down and pushed out, not because he lacked potential, but because his coach refused to teach him with respect, that was the moment Ethan knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Marcus had gotten away with this for too long, and Ethan was about to make sure that ended today. The dojo was buzzing as the evening classes wrapped up, but Ethan had no intention of letting the night end like any other. It was time to reveal the truth. He waited until most of the students had left, then walked toward the office, where Ryan, the so-called manager who barely showed up, was finally present. Ryan was sitting behind his desk, casually flipping through his phone. He barely looked up when Ethan entered. "Can I help you?" Ryan asked, not even bothering to stand. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached up, pulled off the baseball cap he had been wearing all week, and ran a hand through his hair. He saw Ryan's brow furrow slightly, as if something about him now looked familiar. Then, he unzipped his hoodie, revealing a black polo embroidered with the dojo's official logo, the kind only executives and owners wore. Ryan's face was drained of color. Ethan crossed his arms, his voice cool but firm. "Yeah, you can help me. You can explain how you've let this place fall apart." Ryan shot to his feet. "Wait, what?" By now, the remaining instructors, including Marcus and a few of the other trainers, had gathered outside the office, hearing the commotion. Some of the front desk staff hovered nearby, exchanging nervous glances. Ethan stepped forward. "I'm Ethan Carter. I own this dojo." The silence was deafening. Marcus, who had spent the last week mocking students, humiliating members, and acting like an untouchable authority, stared at him, his mouth slightly open. The front desk receptionist shifted uncomfortably, suddenly remembering all the times she had barely acknowledged Ethan's presence. Ryan cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle. "Look, Ethan, Ethan held up a hand, cutting him off. "I've been undercover here for a week. I've seen everything." His gaze flicked toward Marcus. "I watched you humiliate a student until he quit," then to the front desk attendant. "I saw you ignore members like they were an inconvenience." Finally back to Ryan. "And I've seen how little you care about this place." Ryan swallowed hard. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Ethan said sharply. I built this dojo to be a place where people felt welcome, where they learned discipline and respect, not just for martial arts, but for each other. And what did I see this week? He shook his head. That's not my dojo. The air was thick with tension. Ethan let the silence settle, watching as realization sank into the faces of those who had failed, the very people they were meant to guide. Change was coming, and it was going to start now. With Marcus and Ryan gone, the weight of leadership now fell on Ethan's shoulders. But he knew he couldn't fix the dojo alone. He needed someone who not only understood the values it was built on, but had the heart to lead by example. And there was only one person who had consistently shown that strength: Sophia. Sophia had always been a dedicated instructor, one of the few who genuinely cared about the students. She had pushed them to improve without tearing them down, encouraged them when they struggled, and stood up for them, even when it put her at odds with Marcus. For too long she had been overshadowed and dismissed, but that ended today. Ethan found her in the training hall, wiping down the mats after the last class. She looked up, surprised to see him approaching with purpose. You did more for this dojo in 1 week than Marcus did in 3 years, Ethan said, cutting straight to the point. I need someone I can trust to help rebuild this place, someone who actually cares. Sophia's brow furrowed. Ethan, I want you to be the head instructor, he interrupted. Not just another coach, but someone who sets the tone for this academy, someone who makes sure this never happens again. She stared at him, her expression shifting from shock to uncertainty. Are you sure? There are people with more experience. Experience means nothing without the right attitude, Ethan said firmly. You stood up for students when no one else would. You taught with respect. That's the kind of leadership we need. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, then a slow, determined nod. If it means making this dojo what it was meant to be, I'm in. With Sophia stepping up, Ethan wasted no time making the changes permanent. He restructured the training programs, ensuring no student was humiliated for struggling. He introduced a new mentorship system, where advanced students would guide beginners instead of mock them. Accountability became the foundation of the dojo. Instructors would now be evaluated based on how well they inspired and supported students, not just on skill. For the first time in a long time, the academy was no longer a place of intimidation, it was a place of growth. And with Sophia leading the way, Ethan knew it would stay that way. With Sophia at the helm and Ethan reinforcing the dojo's values, the transformation began. It wasn't just about new rules, it was about rebuilding the entire culture from the ground up. For too long, intimidation and favoritism had ruled, but now, the academy was finally becoming what it was meant to be, a place where students could grow, learn, and push themselves without fear of humiliation. The first change was restoring respect in training. No longer were students berated for making mistakes or struggling with techniques. Instead, instructors emphasized guidance over punishment, encouraging discipline while ensuring every student felt valued, regardless of skill level. Senior students were now expected to mentor newcomers, not mock them, fostering a supportive environment where growth was celebrated, not ridiculed. The front desk staff, once indifferent, now greeted students with enthusiasm, setting a welcoming tone the moment they stepped inside. Classes became structured yet dynamic, with clear pathways for progression and fair opportunities for advancement. No more favoritism, no more toxic leadership. But the biggest change? The energy. Where the dojo had once been tense, filled with students afraid to speak up, laughter and determination replaced silence and fear. More students stayed after class to practice, helping each other refine their techniques. Parents who had once hesitated to enroll their children now watched with pride as their kids trained under instructors who truly cared. One evening, as Ethan stood by the entrance watching a class in session, he finally saw it, the dojo he had always envisioned. No more broken spirits, no more crushed confidence. Just students eager to improve, instructors passionate about teaching, and a culture built on respect, not fear. As Sophia led a warm-up session, she caught Ethan's gaze and gave him a nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had rebuilt together. The dojo wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. As Ethan watched the dojo flourish under its new leadership and culture, he reflected on the most critical lesson he had learned. Leadership isn't just about setting rules and expecting results. It requires active involvement. For too long, he had assumed that his academy would uphold his original values simply because he had established them. But without direct engagement, those values had been slowly eroded by unchecked behavior, toxic leadership, and misplaced priorities. Ethan had built the dojo to empower and uplift, but in his absence it had become a place of fear, humiliation, and favoritism. He had relied too much on managers and instructors to maintain standards, never realizing that without proper oversight, bad habits would take root and spread. It was only when he immersed himself in the dojo as an undercover student that he truly saw the cracks in the foundation. The biggest wake-up call came when he witnessed how toxic leadership can shape an entire culture. Just one instructor, like Mason, had been enough to turn an inspiring learning environment into a hostile battlefield for students. Meanwhile, the front desk's indifference proved that poor leadership doesn't always come in the form of outright cruelty. Sometimes negligence is just as damaging. Ethan knew now that being a leader meant more than reviewing performance reports or attending occasional events. It meant showing up, listening, and ensuring that the values he believed in were not just written on a mission statement, but lived out in every class. It meant empowering the right people like Sophia to lead with integrity and making it clear that standards weren't just goals, but non-negotiable expectations. From this point forward, Ethan vowed never to be a passive leader again. He would be present, engaged, and ready to step in whenever necessary. His dojo wasn't just a business, it was a community. And as its leader, his presence and commitment would be the foundation that held it all together.